Before we dive in, this week's episode is brought to you by my free cheat sheet, 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write. In this guide, I give you 30 ways that you can find time to write in the small gaps that appear between the various errands and tasks and responsibilities that you have in your day-to-day life. Now, you might be thinking that you don't have any time to spare, but I can guarantee these top tips will give you writing time you didn't think you had. If you thought writing always involved a pen and paper or a keyboard, think again. If you thought you needed at least an hour at a time to write your manuscript, I help you reframe that. You won't be disappointed. Get your free copy of 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write by going to emmadesi.com/30 top tips. Okay, let's dive in to today's episode. Liz Alterman is the author of domestic suspense novel The Perfect Neighbourhood, the young adult novel He'll Be Waiting, and the memoir Sad Sacked. Her essays and humour pieces have appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, McSweeney's Internet Tendency and other publications. Liz lives in New Jersey with her husband and 3 sons, and when she isn't writing, she spends most days reading, microwaving the same cup of coffee, and looking up synonyms, which I do a lot as well. I don't know if you do, but I'm always looking up synonyms. Lovely conversation with Liz. What a lovely woman. And I really admire the transition that she's made in all of her careers, actually, from being in financial services. She was made redundant and tried her hand at doing article writing, which then took off and led to a second career from which she was made redundant, which has now led her to memoir writing and fiction writing. So she has turned her hand, learnt new skills at every step of the way. And she offers some good advice if you are writing a memoir and you're a little bit worried about naming names in your memoir. And then later we also talk about how you can maximise the time you do have to write. She was somebody who believed she could only write when she had 2 or 3 hours at a time. But due to necessity and wanting to finish her book, she realised she had to shake things up. And so she gives some great advice about how you could do that too if that's you. If you feel that you need to have 2 or 3 hours space before you can write, she might be able to help you see that you can do it in shorter spaces and a little more frequently. So listen to our conversation. I really enjoyed chatting with Liz, and I'm sure you will too. Well, Liz, thank you very much for joining me today. I've been looking forward to chatting with you.
I have as well, Emma. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here chatting with you.
Well, now, listen, I always start by asking my guests, what was your journey to writing? Because most of us come to the slightly scenic route. So I'd be interested, I'd love to know about yours.
Yes, I would definitely say mine was scenic as well. I've always loved to read and write. And so it was sort of a passion and a hobby of mine, but I never really thought that it was something I could necessarily pursue as a career, just because of how competitive you hear it is, and is it sustainable? Can you really earn a living? Mm-hmm. But I was an English major in college, mainly by default. I had been applying to some schools for accounting or economics, and then I thought, you know what? I'm just going to apply to one for English because that's my true love, and that ended up being what I studied. So, but I will say when I graduated, there were not many jobs in publishing, or at least no one was calling me for those jobs in publishing. So I ended up in the financial sector. I worked in a customer service department, helping 401k participants sort of navigate their plans and, choose their investments. And it was as dull as it sounds. It was long days on the phone, sort of repeating the same information.
Mm-hmm. So for those of us outside of America, what's a 401k?
Oh, okay. Thank you for asking. It's your retirement plan. It's your money will be taken straight from your paycheck and put into this retirement plan. And then your employer may match up to a certain percentage. So
Okay.
let's say you elected 10% to go into this sort of pre-tax account. Your employer might match, let's say 5 or 6% dollar for dollar. So it's really worth taking advantage of. So, and I have to say, if I hadn't gotten that job, I probably never would have known what a 401k was. And I would probably have zero saved for retirement, but because of that. So anyway, from there, I stayed in the financial world for a little bit, and I just wasn't loving it. And then one day I saw an ad for a job that was asking for someone who had a financial background and also a love of writing. And I applied, and I ended up working as an energy reporter. So that was sort of like a foot in the door to writing and an opportunity to kind of make a living as a writer. But then I guess over the course of the 6 years that I was at that company, I got married and I had my first child. And unfortunately, this was back in 2002. There really was no hybrid work. I went back to my employer and I said, would it be possible for me to work part-time? Would it be possible for me to work from home? Just to sort of keep the childcare to a minimum, the cost of childcare. And then also it was adding like 2 hours onto my day, the drop off, the pickup, the commute. And my employer said, no, if we did it for you, we'd have to do it for everybody. So I ended up leaving that job. And that's when I really said to myself, like, what am I going to do? And can I try to freelance write and make, maybe even like a part-time living at it? And so that's what I did. And it was going smoothly until about 2014 when I was laid off from a job that I had taken as a full-time editor of an online news site. And so once I was let go, that kind of sent me reeling all over again. And I thought, I guess it's back to freelancing. So I did freelance, and I was lucky because I had this experience, and I was sort of, even though I wasn't necessarily, I hadn't had, I guess, a straight career path. I had kind of taken detours and timeouts along the way to raise my family, but I had built up a portfolio of articles. And so that sort of helped me get more freelance work. And I guess one of those articles that I was assigned was interviewing a woman who had started a writer's school locally. And and she was lovely. And I guess one of my last questions on our call was, what's your most popular class? And she said, it's memoir writing. Everybody feels they have a story to tell. And so it got me thinking, do I have a story to tell? Or how nice would that be to have this sort of creative outlet of taking a class and listening to stories written by your peers and sharing your own work? And so that's what I did. I enrolled in that class, and it was sort of almost like a challenge to myself. Can I write something longer? And what I ended up focusing on was, so I had lost my job, and unfortunately 6 weeks earlier, my husband had been laid off from his job. And so we were home together, and, kind of as time passed, it was winter. We have a small, older home, and we have 3 children. So it was definitely getting tense, to use a euphemism. It was getting tight in our house because our children were getting bigger, and our house felt like it was shrinking. And so as tension sort of escalated, I thought maybe this would be something that I could write about, because what are the odds of the two of us being let go simultaneously and us trying to reinvent ourselves at midlife was definitely a challenge we'd never anticipated.
Yeah, was your husband in financial services too?
He had worked for the same company, but in a different department. He was a multimedia producer, but yes.
It's funny, financial services can be the best, but also it's the most ruthless as well. So when you go, that's it.
Yes, you're in until you're out. And all of a sudden, so he was let go, I guess, in a group of, I think maybe 50 people. And wow. So, and he kind of, the way he described it, he would see someone across the office, pick up a phone, disappear, come back with a box. And so as you could hear phones ringing, okay, your number's up, and right.
Just you talking about it's giving me palpitations. You can just picture being in that office, and the wide eyes around the room trying to pick out whose phone is going to go next.
Exactly, almost like a reality show, that you never want to participate in.
Yeah. So two people, as you say, midlife and looking to reinvent themselves. I just wanted to pick up on something you said, though, before you got laid off that second time. You'd gone from doing the odd piece here and there to being an editor of a news site. So clearly there was talent there and people were recognizing it, and you were getting more and more work and then getting a full-time position. So that must have felt really good and a confidence booster.
It did. I have to say, it definitely was, because the place that hired me full time was one that I had been freelancing for about a year or so. And so when the opportunity came up, and I guess one of the managing editors had said, "Would you like to apply for this?" I was really flattered. I mean, it ended up being a lot more work than I kind of bargained for initially, but it was such a learning experience for me. And I look back now and I think, okay, if I could do that, I feel like I could almost do anything, because you were, especially as the company cut corners, I might be out covering a fire. I might be out at a town council meeting, at a board of education meeting, at the ribbon cutting for a new business. You were kind of this like Jane of all trades covering everything. And so it was really almost like you had no choice but to grow as a writer and an editor very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Sort of from out of the frying pan and into the fire almost. Yay.
Exactly. Because as a freelancer, you have the opportunity to pick and choose. You can always say no to an assignment, but when it's your full-time gig, you're there no matter whether you want to be or not, right?
So you learn on the job how to write an article, how to put it all together. And then you went from that to writing a memoir. And when I take it you took the ladies' class.
I did, and I loved it.
Yeah. So how did you find that switch over? Because memoir, yes, there's truth in it, but still you are telling a story in quite a different way, I would imagine, from a factual piece for a news website. So how did you find that transition?
That's a great question. And I will say that was a challenge for me too, because I think also when you're writing a memoir, people want it to be very personal. It's almost like you have to kind of lay everything bare. And so that's where I think taking the class really helped, because the instructor and my peers, they would say like, okay, you have to dig deeper. You have to tell us how you were feeling. Tell us about every emotion. Tell us about, because I do try to treat things with humor. And I guess while I'd been home with my children, I had been writing some kind of lighthearted essays about parenting or motherhood. But of course, the memoir, it was a bit darker, especially as, our bills kept coming in. They're not stopping, and the paychecks had stopped. So people would want to know, okay, you have to tell us everything. And then I was also trying to kind of protect the privacy of my children. I knew I had my husband's okay to write this, and him being in the writing world, he would help, editing and things, reread and say, okay, I think you need a little more here, or okay, this is too long, you're off on a tangent, get rid of this. But I wanted to kind of protect my children's privacy, because I felt like they didn't really ask to be part of this. And but in the classes, people would say, you really have to play up your children, because that's weighing on you. How are you going to provide for them if you don't get a new job? And so striking that balance was tough, to kind of let readers know that, yes, I'm worried about this, but at the same time, not necessarily violating their trust or privacy.
Yeah, that's something that comes up quite a lot with the memoir people in my audience. And it's a question I see, not just in my space, actually, but in other people's as well. I want to write my memoir, but what are the legal ramifications? Especially, I think, if you're on the other side of the pond, that can be very serious. And so I'm guessing you didn't have that for your particular memoir, but is that something they covered in your class? How do you handle writing about somebody who perhaps was not very nice to you, and that's why you're writing about them, versus maintaining their privacy.
Right. That is definitely a challenge. And I think when it came down to working with my editor, she was really wonderful about saying, let's put an author's note at the beginning where we kind of talk about, especially when I did get a new job, it was really kind of a bait and switch. It was not the job that I expected. And I worked with different women who sort of all had conflicting opinions. And that made it really challenging for me. And I cover that in my original version. And then my editor said, you know what? Why don't we kind of combine them into like a composite character? Because when they were three separate people, it sort of became almost unwieldy for the reader to keep track of the women. And really, they each had their own spin on things that was just kind of turning me in a circle and making it difficult to do my job. You know, I would submit to one and she would say, we need more emotion. We need you to feel deeply. And then the next one would say, take out all of your opinion, just report the facts. And so I felt like I was never moving forward. So my editor said, you know what, turn this into sort of one composite character who has differing opinions, and we'll put a note at the beginning, and we'll note that we're doing it sort of for brevity and to keep it a little bit more clear. And then we also did go through a legal edit. We had a lawyer who kind of weighed in on things. But I agree. I've been in a workshop with a woman who was telling a wonderful story about her life and the things she's overcome. And part of it involved an ex-husband. And she was saying, you know, I'll change his, and we changed the names, but she was saying, you know, if I change his name, is that enough? Or is he too identifiable? Is what I say a cause? So she was definitely hesitant about how to move forward with that. And I think she's still working on the book and trying to iron out how to address that, because it's very tricky.
Yeah, a very thorny issue, but some lovely suggestions there from you for anyone who's listening, to have that author note at the beginning, just to sort of, I guess, you know, this is saying, this is my memory, this is my experience and how I saw it. Then adding the composite characters, or creating the composite character, which I think is a great idea. And then, having a legal edit, I'm sure, cannot do any harm, and just will give peace of mind, if nothing else. Yay.
Exactly. Because in my book, there is one part where I guess it was funny. It was my editor had this concern. My family and I had taken a trip to Universal Studios, and it was at a time where I was just in a very bad headspace, because we were still, I guess my husband was still out of work. And, you know, anytime you go to a theme park or on vacation, everything is so expensive. And so as my children are like requesting more and more butter beers, and, you know, we want to take the Hogwarts Express into the other world, and I realize it's going to be an additional $400, and I start to panic. So I guess so spoiler alert, we didn't do it. But I guess my editor was a little concerned, like, was I being too harsh about my experience at Universal Studios? But the legal team said, you know, this is this woman's opinion. And she says, like, she's in a bad place when she goes to this theme park. So it's no reflection necessarily on the park. It was just kind of a bad place that I was in that day.
Yeah, but I think that's a great example of specifics, and how we need to be specific in all the stories we tell. So being specific about Universal, be on this trip and the cost of it, it's something that was unique to you in that day and where your headspace was, as you say. But equally, other families, whether or not it was Universal Studios, have had those days out, and the costs keep mounting, and you're feeling I don't want to let the kids down. I want them to have a good time, but at the same time, I don't want to be having to spend all this money. And it's a very real concern for people. And I would love for you just to give us the name of the memoir, because with winter coming up and people feeling the squeeze, they certainly are here in the UK, and I believe it's the same over in the States.
Absolutely.
This winter, people are going to be really feeling that squeeze. So this might be very timely for people to get some humor and some perspective on it, and a kind of an uplift for their situation. So do tell us.
Thank you. It's called Sad Sacked, and it's on audio. And so it's available through Audible, though I am excited. I recently signed a contract. It'll be out in print and ebook in June of 2024. So right now it's just available through audio, but I'm hoping that people can, when you talk about that squeeze, maybe order it through their library, or it's part of Audible's Plus catalog. So if you're an Audible member, it should be free to you. So
oh, fantastic. Well, I'll make sure I link to that for people who are interested.
Oh,
well, lovely. Thank you. So you've mentioned that, you love to bring an element of humor into it. And I worked very briefly in financial services, and I do marvel that you managed to bring humor and finance together. That's very impressive. But does everything that you write, how am I trying to phrase this? Do you intentionally add the humor, or does it just come out naturally? That's just the way you are.
I think a little bit of both. Like, I was just writing an essay recently, and then when I looked back, I felt like the humor piece was missing. And sometimes I think humor gives you an opportunity to really show your voice or showcase your voice. It's kind of what separates you telling the story from someone else telling the story, those observations. So I try, if I can, to infuse it with humor. And I have to say, my mom, such a fan of Irma Bombeck. She was always quoting Irma Bombeck, and Dave Barry is another writer that we've always loved reading his work, or Joel Stein. So I think it's kind of like I've gravitated toward reading those humorists. And so I try to build that in, especially if you're writing about something dark. I think it's nice to try to balance it.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. How do you kind of find that juxtaposition between the two?
I think that it can be a challenge. I think, sometimes especially when my husband and I were out of work and I was feeling, sort of the darkness creeping in, I would look over, and my husband, we had different reactions to being laid off. He was kind of relieved because he had felt burned out. He had a long commute. He was putting in long hours. He was leaving at like 5:15 in the morning to catch a train. So, but then I kept waiting for him to kind of have this realization, I need to get back to work. So one day, but meanwhile, he was taking over like all the household chores, which people were saying, oh, you're so lucky. That's great. But I was saying, on one hand it is, but on the other, I think he's hiding out and he doesn't want to face the future. So one day he comes up from the basement. He's been doing more laundry. I said he was washing more sheets than your average Hilton. He was just, in this cycle of laundry. And he comes up and he says, I finally figured out what I'm going to do. And I felt such relief. He's going to say something wonderful. And he says, I want to join the YMCA. And I guess like he felt like he was going to work out and reinvent himself sort of physically as opposed to professionally. And it was just, so I just thought, oh my God, how is this happening? And so I tried to find the humor along the way just so that I wouldn't, keep slipping further down into that dark space.
Yes. Oh, okay. Yeah. It's because it could be easy, I imagine, in that instance to just slip into that. What are you talking about? We haven't got the money for you to do that.
Right.
But taking a break. And so do you find it easier? Our listeners won't be able to see you, but I can see that you've got a very naturally smiley face and a twinkly face. And so I wonder if you just in the moment can see things humorously, or do you have to take a breath, take a moment, and then later you can come back to it and find the humor?
I think that's a great question. I think I started a blog around that time, and I was kind of joking that, I didn't know if it would ever see the light of day or have any readers, but I was kind of saying this is almost like a diary of my descent into madness if things don't turn around. And at least, my kids will be able to look back at it and say, well, mom tried, in the beginning, she tried. And so I think, as I was writing, I would try to take, we had some strange experiences where I drove far and paid a lot of tolls and metered parking. And I got to my interview and the interviewer completely forgot that I was showing up and just kind of went through the motions. And so I felt like we had different experiences where, like, if you could step outside of how awful it was in the moment and try to find the humor, it could kind of get you over that hurdle. Or I think it might be Nora Ephron who says, like, if you can tell a story and find the humor in it, then it's not like it's happened to you. It's kind of like you take control of that bad thing and you're kind of changing the narrative there. I'm botching her quote, but it's a good one. And
it is a good one. And that's such a great, for any situation that we have, if we can be a little bit more neutral about it or see the funny side in it, then yeah, we don't get sucked into that dark side and just descent down a drain. But yeah, as you say, get to be in control of it and then perhaps dictate a little bit of how things go forward. So that's a great philosophy to have for life. So well, what I want to do now is switch to, because you made another switch. So you went from journalism to memoir, and then you've switched again to fiction.
I have, yes.
So what prompted you to, did you feel, okay, I've said what I need to say now in my memoir, but now I've got the bug for writing for writing fiction, I want to try a hand at a novel?
Exactly. I think before the memoir, I didn't necessarily believe that I could write a longer piece. I guess in freelancing, maybe the longest piece I'd probably ever written was maybe 1,600 words. And so I thought 70 to 90,000 sounded so daunting. And I just thought, how will I ever get beyond, let's say, 11,000 words or 20,000 words. And so that's where, again, I think taking those classes is so helpful, or having peers that you can workshop something with, just to go into knowing, okay, by next Tuesday, I need 10 pages. And even if they're not great pages, there's something that I can revise later. Mm-hmm. I think that writing the memoir sort of proved to me, okay, you can get past that. You're going to be able to push past those hurdles and write something longer. And so that's what I decided. I would try my hand at fiction, especially because I love to read. And I thought that was kind of just a life goal of mine, to see if I could write something, a novel.
And so both because you've written a young adult novel and you've published your first adult fiction as well. And they're both sort of suspense, thrillerish. So have you found it that you've been able to bring your humor into that as well?
I think sometimes I try to throw in a side character who brings a little humor or levity, or even a funny circumstance. Just as an example, in my adult novel, The Perfect Neighborhood, there's a child who goes missing. And so another mom in the neighborhood starts a meal train. I don't know if you have meal trains in the UK, but it's sort of where people sign up and they'll bring a dinner on an assigned night. Mm-hmm. And so this one mom, she kind of gets, I don't know if you'd say competitive, but then she sets it up, she brings the meal, but then she's wondering, where is her thank you note? And where is her Le Creuset, Dutch oven? Why isn't it back yet? And so I'm kind of like gently poking fun at those characters, and so I hope it provides a bit of levity to the more dark situation of where is this missing child.
Oh, it's making me think of sort of Leanne Moriarty.
I love her. Absolutely.
Oh yeah. How she does that. I'm going to read yours and I'm going to find out how you do it, but I admire you both at being able to bring these humorous voices into what could be, I think if I was writing them, they'd be very dark and very serious. So I always admire writers
for that too, right? I'd love to read that.
I do always admire writers who can bring that light touch in and not take us down too many dark alleys. So you mentioned that, you've got a husband who I assume is working again now. He's stopped doing the laundry.
Thankfully, yes.
And you've got three children, 3 sons, in fact, so full on. How have you managed to create that balance around finding the breathing space that we need for our writing, and then having family life?
Oh, I think it's a challenge. I have to say, I joke that I'm never more popular than when I try to sneak away to write. If we could sit at the dinner table and I'll go around saying like, okay, tell me about your day. Tell me, did anything happen? Nobody, they're eating, they're rushing, they want to get back to their own thing. But if I sneak away with my laptop and I hope to revise, suddenly everybody's there. Oh, did I tell you what happened at lunch today? Do you want to hear what happened in gym? And I think I do, but not now. So I try to carve out space. I'm very fortunate that my husband is really supportive in that, especially when my boys were younger. If he knew I wanted to kind of take a chunk of, let's say, 2 to 3 hours to write, he would kind of take them out golfing or doing something where they were kind of out of the house to give me that quiet space. Of course, when he gets back, he'll say, like, you did write, didn't you? Like, I think he gets nervous that, my mom will call or I'll turn on some bad TV or something.
Which a lot of authors do, don't they? When they're like trying to procrastinate about something. Yeah,
it is. It's hard to carve out that. But I also think, again, I can't say enough good things about taking a class or a workshop, because then it's kind of like I'm held to this deadline of I need these pages ready for such and such a date. And so then I think my kids now have they understand and they kind of respect it almost the way if they have homework due, it's kind of like, this is my homework. But when they were younger, if they had a ball game or something, if I'd take them early, I would just sit in the car with my laptop or even a notebook and try to write whenever. Because I think I used to be kind of like, well, I shouldn't write unless I have a carved out, time period. But I realized I was never going to get anywhere with that. So even if I take a walk, I might just speak into the notes app or the voice recorder. And of course, later it's bad because I can hear myself huffing and puffing as I'm going up the hill, like maybe the character should do. And I think you got to get in better shape. But I think it's whatever you can do to get those ideas down. I think you have to almost like make that time wherever it's available.
I 100% agree totally, because I got 3 kids as well and started writing when they were little. But I do hear from people who say that they do need that space. I need to have 2 or 3 hours that I know are just mine, and I've got silence in the house. And it's hard to kind of encourage people to try, writing perhaps for shorter periods, but a bit more regularly, so you don't need to take so long to get into the piece.
Exactly.
Did it take long for you to make that transition, or did it just needs must and you just had to do it?
Well, it did take me a while to transition. I think when I was writing my young adult thriller, what I would do every time I sat down to write, I would spend about 20 minutes rereading the passage before to try to get in that voice and that headspace, that mindset. And then suddenly I'd realize my 1 hour, 1/3 of my hour was gone because I had been rereading. And then also as I'm rereading, depending on the day, that self-doubt would creep in. And especially when you've read something 100 times, you think, oh, this isn't very good. Nobody's going to want to read this. What am I doing? And then it's, instead of being productive, now I'm kind of wallowing in this whole, I'm mired in confusion about where to go next and what to do. So I think as I've gone on to write, I kind of think, whatever came before can be fixed later. You have to just keep moving forward. Unless there's a detail that I want to look at or a time frame I need to confirm, I kind of just tell myself, you'll reread that. If this becomes a book, you'll end up reading it 100 times anyway. So just go forward.
That is so true. I think those are one of the wisest words I've heard about kind of not going back to edit. You will read this book till you never want to see it again. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Well, I hope that I love everything that you said there. And I really hope that if anyone's listening who does really kind of feel are sort of clinging to that feeling that you've got to have those 2 or 3 hours, that you've listened to Liz's thoughts here and would be willing to give those things a go, not necessarily reading what you wrote the day before, but diving in. And then you can fix it on the 100 times that you will subsequently read it. Such a good idea. So I want to talk to you about your latest release, which is A Perfect Neighborhood. Please do tell us about it and who might enjoy it.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, as you mentioned, Leanne Moriarty is an author I love. Sally Hepworth is another author, Lucy Foley. I think that readers who enjoy those works will hopefully enjoy this one. It starts off, there's a lot of gossip in it, a lot of different women in this upscale neighborhood who you get to hear their voices and sort of how they perceive one another and their town. And so it's set in a fictional New Jersey town where I've lived in suburbs of New Jersey my whole life. I say for better or worse, because I feel like it's given me quite a handle on the characters, if you will. But it starts off with a mom sort of talking about this golden couple in their town. The wife, Allison, is a former model and actress, and her husband is this former rock star. And everyone is sort of speculating about them, especially when Allison leaves town in the middle of the night and no one knows, why. Is she off on another job? Has she left her husband? Where are they? And so that's been the gossip for about 2 months, until this little boy who's almost 6 goes missing on his walk home from kindergarten. And one thing that I guess I've gotten a lot of feedback is, who would ever let a child walk home alone at that age? But he's walking just 3 blocks and he's supposed to be with his friend. But on that day, his friend has a dentist appointment. And also it sort of speaks to the characters really think, because they're in this leafy, affluent suburb, almost like they're untouchable. They have this false sense of security. And sort of compounding the issue is that the babysitter who's supposed to be waiting there for him on his porch is late that day. So we don't know, did he arrive home and then go elsewhere? Did someone snatch him on the walk? And so the babysitter's point of view is one that you get as well. And so much like every other character, she has her own secrets. And so it sort of, goes from one perspective to the other, but they all intertwine.
And so have you written it with a multiple point of view?
I have, yes.
And how did you find that experience?
I enjoyed it because somebody was asking me, was it tricky? And I said, it was tricky in certain ways, but in others it was a relief, because let's say I sort of was out of ideas or stumped for one character, I could just flip over to someone else's story and kind of let the other characters kind of just percolate their ideas or their voices speak in the back of my head and focus on a different one. But I will say, when I got to the end, I did have to go back and kind of pull it apart a bit and see where maybe was I spending too much time with one character? Should I split up that chapter? And then trying to make the timelines work out so that if it's Thursday in one character's world, when we see the next one, we need it to be either Friday, Saturday. We need to keep moving forward in the timeline. So
little details can really slip you up, can't they?
It was tricky, right? And that's where, having other eyes on it was so helpful.
Mm-hmm. And so I was going to ask 2 questions there, but let me ask the one about workshop. So did you workshop this book?
I did.
So in the workshop, you would provide some pages and then other people would read it and they would feed back.
Right. What helps too is in the workshop, unfortunately, when I started it, it was right before COVID happened. So we probably only met in person 3 or 4 times, but then we were fortunate to be able to go online and do it that way. So each person would read their pages aloud, which I think that's advice I would give to any writer, because for me, especially, I could hear where the dialogue just didn't sound natural, or where I was reusing the same words. And I thought, or just even, okay, one sentence is too long. This isn't good. So that's really helpful. But yes, they would give you kind of like their live feedback. And then I was very fortunate. One woman in the class, she really went above and beyond. She would say, email me maybe late at night. I was thinking about this. And what if this happened? Or what if that happened? So she's in the acknowledgments in the back, because I couldn't have done it without her.
And what a great sign that she was hooked. She was enjoying this and she was thinking about it outside of class.
Yes, I was always so flattered. Even if what she came up with was going to give me more work to do, I was so grateful for her opinions and her insight. She was really wonderful.
Mm-hmm. So congratulations on that release, which was earlier in July this year. So I'm sure that you have another project either brewing or on the go. What are you working on at the moment?
Well, I completed another domestic suspense manuscript and I've turned it in. I was very fortunate when I sold The Perfect Neighborhood, I sold it in the US to Crooked Lane, and then Legend Press in the UK purchased the UK rights. So what was super fun for me was to see two different covers. I love to see different visions for it. So both my US and UK editor have the new manuscript, and I jokingly say, like, the suspense is killing me. I'm hoping I'm hoping that they enjoy this, and hopefully it'll turn into a book. But I'm kind of waiting. I'm in this kind of holding pattern because I know they each have a million submissions that come their way. So I'm just trying to be patient and hope for the best.
And how long have you been waiting so far?
I think about 2 months or so.
Okay, so that'll give listeners just a feel for,
right.
It's always a waiting game. It's always a waiting game.
It really is, yes.
Well, Liz, it's been lovely chatting with you. I've really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thank you for your time.
Oh, pleasure. Where can listeners find out more about you, your books, and your blog?
Oh, thank you. My website is lizalterman.com. And I think on there, people can find me on Twitter, on Instagram. Again, I'm pretty basic, Liz Alterman everywhere. And I just would like to say also, if any readers choose The Perfect Neighborhood or my young adult thriller or memoir for a book club, I'm more than happy to Zoom or Skype in, for as little or as long as they'll have me. So I have some book club questions on my website, and I'm happy to do that. I joke that my mom is like a huge coupon clipper, so I feel like I have to say this is free of charge. There's no charge. It's complimentary, but I'm just flattered if anyone cares to read anything.
That's wonderful. Oh, well, I will be sure to link to all of that in the show notes so people can easily find you.
Thank you so much, Emma.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for yours.
If you're a first-time novelist who is struggling to either finish your novel or get those revisions to where you want them to be, then I've got just the thing for you. I have a small group coaching program which runs over 12 months, and over the course of that program I will help you fix those plot problems that you've been struggling with. I'll help you get under the surface of your characters so you really get to know them and what's driving them. And crucially for you, I give you that self-belief that you need to get you through the roller coaster that is writing a novel, so that you can carry on, get to the end, and get your book, your story out into the world so it can change people's lives. If that sounds good to you, if that is something that you'd be interested in doing, I know I can help you get to where you want to be. So book a call with me. Let's have a chat and see if we are a good fit for each other. If you're interested in doing that, then go to emmadesi.com/story builder. I look forward to chatting. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found that helpful and inspirational. Now, don't forget to come on over to Facebook and join my group, Turning Readers into Writers. It is especially for you if you are a beginner writer who is looking to write their first novel. If you join the group, you will also find a free cheat sheet there called 3 Secret Hacks to Write with Consistency. So go to emmadesi.com/turning readers into writers. Hit join. Can't wait to see you in there. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.